Thanks. Well, I'm glad you all are taking some time out of your day with us, and hopefully this will give you some information that you'll find useful. So if you have questions or comments as I'm going through this session, feel free. And this is kind of informal, and I want it to meet your needs. So just make that known. Okay, just a little background about where bead racks came from. They're also known as a reckon rack, or you might hear them called a math rack. And they were designed by Adrian Treffers, who was a researcher at the Freudenthal Institute in the Netherlands. And they're designed to support the natural development of children's number sense. Okay, and they come in different versions. Some just have 1 row of beads, some might have 2 rows, and some have up to 10 rows. Okay, but one thing they have in common is that they're arranged with that 5 and 5 structure that makes 10. Okay, so each row has 10 of 2 colors beads. Generally, the commercial versions are red and white. Okay, and this tool is used to provide learners with the visual models that they need to discover number relationships and develop a variety of addition and subtraction strategies, which include things like doubles and doubles plus and minus 1, bridging to tens, and compensation. And kids can demonstrate their strategies using a bead rack. Okay, and here are just some of the different types of bead racks that you might see. Some of these are commercially made, and some of these are teacher made. This one in particular is one I just took a picture of in a classroom where a teacher had made the bead rack for her board using pool noodles and cut those apart. So, and I think that was a magnetic curtain rod that she used to secure it to the board. So if you're looking for a teacher size demo one and you don't have the funds for a commercial one, there's a DIY way to make it. Right? And there's also an app that is very helpful that we're going to be utilizing during this session as well from the Math Learning Center. And this one is a little bit different than the others because the color difference is blue and yellow, but the structure is the same. So even though the colors might be different, it's the same because we're just wanting them to see that structure and that quantity. So the color is, that's the significance of the colors that we use to see the quantities. Okay. We're going to take just a minute to watch a little video that we made for a session to just show you how to make your own bead rack and the materials that you need. It's only about 1.5 minutes, but I think the link should be provided. So if you want to share it with other teachers in your building, or even if you send home materials and you want kids to make it at home with their parents, this might be something that you can share with them.
Let's make a 10-row bead rack. You will need 50 red beads and 50 blue beads, 10 strips of elastic that measure approximately 16 inches, and a whiteboard. To make this a little bit easier, when you take the piece of elastic, you'll want to pinch one end as you slide the beads on. You'll place the beads in groups of 5, alternating colors, 5 blue and then 5 red, to make 10 per row. Now you have one row finished. Next, secure the row by tying it to your board. I usually tie a double knot to make sure it is secure. Continue making rows until you have 10 rows finished. Your finished board will look like this. Easy peasy.
There you have it. That's how to make your own 10-row board. So, and one of the questions that I did have from some teachers was was how do you secure your rows onto your board? So I just want to answer that with you guys. I can show you here. This one, I just tie them and they're pretty tight and they don't slide around, especially since we use about a 1/4 inch elastic, sorry. But I have seen teachers that thought that their kids might take those off. So if you think that the kids are going to take it off and that is problematic for you, you can always use some duct tape or something to tape them on the back. But I like having them loose like this because then I can change it. So that one, if I want to just use one row, I can take the other rows off or slide them down like I have done down here. So it makes it a little more versatile if you don't secure it to the board, but you know, it's based on your situation. So whatever's convenient for your students and whatever you need to do. Okay. So now if you have a bead rack, and some of you do, because I've seen you showing me your bead racks, and I've been to some of your classrooms actually, so I know you have bead racks there. Now what? What do you do with that thing? And when kids first look at a bead rack, they may not be familiar with that either, depending on the grade level of students that you're working with. So the first time you use your bead rack with your students, you need to orient them to the setting. Okay? And the way to do that is just to ask them what they notice about it. Okay, and you can, if you're working with students one-on-one, like in a math recovery setting or maybe an intervention setting, that's a conversation between the teacher and one student. But you can also do that in a group setting as well by just asking students, what do you notice about this? Okay, and some of their answers will be things like, oh, it's got beads on it, or you know what the colors are and how many in the row, and we want them to notice those things. Okay, and set that noticing. And you know, when you're working with 2 rows, you might ask how many are there in all? There's the 20. I can recall working with some students in my school with the 100 bead rack, and their teachers, because I was an interventionist, their teachers had used them in the classroom and kind of made the assumption that they knew the structure. And so when I asked the students how many beads are on there, they gave me some pretty outrageous numbers, some of them, because they really hadn't oriented themselves to 10 rows of 10, and they were still working on that quantity. So we can't assume that they know, and we find out just by asking, what do you notice about this? And when you use your bead rack, there are some conventions that help us all be on the same page with our students. And one of the best ways to remember, because I always forget when I'm looking at my bead rack, and I actually have my teacher one. This one is one that I used in my classroom, but I'll turn it around so that it's the way you guys would look at it. It is red and black, but I would always remember, okay, which comes first, the red or the black? And for my students, it would be red and white, the red being the dominant color. So the way to remember that is white goes on the right. And so when the student is looking at it, the white or the non-red color would be on the right, and their beads are going to be on the left. And the left side is what we consider out of play. And no, I'm sorry, the right side is out of play, and we push to the left, and what's on the left is in play. Okay. So slide to the left, and that's what they read. The ones on their right side are the ones that are out of play. And it can get a little confusing when you're sitting on, or at least for me, if you're directionally challenged, when you're sitting opposite the students at a table. Sometimes I have to walk around and go, okay, that is on your right and it's on my left, and think about that. So I have seen teachers put a little smiley face sticker on the side that where the beads start. And that's another tip that kind of helps the kids to remember, oh, we start on this side, and slide them that way. Anybody else have other tips for how to work with kids using their bead rack and knowing how to all orient in the same direction? Because that is important when we're talking about how many red ones do you have, how many white ones do you have. If they're turned in different directions, that can kind of be confusing to students. Okay, well, we're going to be talking about some of the teaching progressions that we can work with. And as we do that, if you don't have a bead rack handy, if you have a bead rack handy, using one would be helpful. But if not, if you can click on this application, which I will put in the chat box if I can get it to copy. There it is. And that's the Math Learning Center app. If you'll click on that. You can open up the Math Learning Center app, which is pretty nice. And I may do that too for just a second. And talk about that for just a minute, except that my mouse has disappeared. So I'm so sorry. Oh, there it is.
And I just put the direct link in. Depending on your device, you may not be able to navigate the website. So that thing I just put in will take you straight to the actual app itself if you need that.
Yeah, because I thought I did, the one I did, actually I thought was that way, but it may not have been. Let me do a new share so that I can share what's on my screen with the app. There it is. Now you should be able to see my app that I have open. Okay. And I just have one row of 10 up there right now, but you can add rows by groups of 10, up to 10 rows. And one thing you might notice about these is they're all red and then white. But if I, depending on whether what skill I'm working on, I usually like it where it's divided 5 rows and 5 rows. If I'm working with addition, I like it that way to see that structure. Another nice feature of this is a screen, which you can make whatever size you want. And you can peek under it, which is really nice as well. They also have math notation that you can type in if you want to type in a math problem on your screen. That is the way you do that. And you can change color. And there's also a text box that you can type in and color notate. And there is a drawing tool. And you can change color on your drawing tool as well right there, which is nice. Another feature is being able to share this with students. Now, I think this is a fairly recent feature because when I have used this in the past, this was not a feature that I had. So I can save this image if I wanted to save it, or I can copy it. And I actually did use that tool for a few of my slides. Or you can share the link directly. If I wanted my students to have a 2-row bead rack to work on, I could give them that link and they could copy that. Or if you're teaching in a Zoom room, you can share the code and they can go from there to that code and have the same board. Now, I did test it out to see if you're working from the same board, like if we're all going to work on the same screen, and that's not the case, but they will be working from the same starting point that you have, which might be helpful. Okay, so that is nice features on that virtual tool that the Math Learning Center has. Anybody have any questions, or has anybody used this with your students recently and want to share an experience? Because we'd love to hear about that if you're willing to share.
I haven't used it recently. I've seen it. Teacher that I was volunteering for, she had it on the iPads.
Nice.
And she used it there. Sometimes it was easier than handing out a rack and rack to everybody.
Yeah, and too, they can use their finger to drag things if they're using an iPad, so that makes it nice.
I didn't use the Reck and Rec, but I used the counters app portion of it because they have several different boards, and I just put those on my Schoology page while we were all virtual for them to have some sort of manipulatives to kind of move. That was a little bit easier than Google Slides, drag and place. That can be kind of finicky where they resize on their own. So this was kind of nice to have to kind of bounce back and forth with. If you want to look at the other boards they have.
All right, well, thank you. And what age students were you working with?
First grade.
First grade. So your first graders were able to manipulate it. That's good. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so here's just a little bit of a teaching progression that we're going to talk about. If you've got a board, you might kind of do some of these activities as we go, and I'm just going to hold up the one I've got. Okay, but when I'm beginning with students and I'm thinking about my young ones in elementary, I'm going to begin with just a 1-row bead rack. Okay, and think about building numbers within 10. So when we first tell our students to build a number, we might start with a number, let's say 6. So how might students make 6? Anybody want to just say?
1 bead at a time.
Oh, thank you, Marty. You knew I was thinking about you. I was thinking Marty. Yeah, so they might just slide over one at a time, right? 2, 4, 5, 6, and slide it over. Yeah, and it might look like that. Okay, so but the point of the bead rack, and when I use a bead rack, I'm really wanting kids to see the structures and to start to use the structures, to chunk the numbers. That's the goal of using our bead rack. I don't want them counting 100 beads. And trust me, I've seen kids try to do it. On Dreambox, I used to go on the computer lab when they were working with their virtual manipulators on Dreambox and see them counting by ones, and I would be like, put my hand over the screen and say, oh, what were those colors? What were you seeing? Because that's the purpose of the structure. So when they do that count by ones, it's telling me that they're kind of unitary in their thinking. And so as the teacher, I need to encourage them to start to see chunks. And one of the teacher moves that you can take is to ask them questions like, oh, so how many beads do you have there? And they might tell me 6. How many red ones? 5. Oh, and how many blue ones? 1. So we used 5 and 1 to make 6. Now let's slide that back. Now this time get 6. See if you can do it in one push. So now they're going to think about, oh, I needed a group of 5 and 1 more. And now we're going to slide it. 5 and 1. And then I'm going to question again, how many red ones? How many blue ones? How many all together? Oh, it made 6.
I think Dreambox, some of their activities does that very same thing where they encourage them to do it in the least number of moves.
Right. Yes, that's what they'll tell them. They'll slide it back and say, now can you do that in fewer moves? Can you do that? Yeah, and that sort of thing. And so we want to, so noticing how they're building numbers is important, and not just that they're building numbers. So the first thing we're going to do is build the number. The next thing that you would do is some quick images, and quick images are kind of those flashes that we've done with other things. So after my students are proficient at building the numbers themselves, and we have discussed, what they're made of, what their parts are in their partitions, the next thing I might do is something similar to this. What did you see? That was a flash. Were you looking? I'm going to show you again. This time, let's pay attention, boys and girls. What did you see?
My eyes aren't that good. I'm sorry.
I know I might be tiny on your screen. I'm sorry.
Or tiny on our screen, so I can't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or 8, maybe. 8.
Yes. Hey.
Yeah.
Good job, Sarah. Your eyes are better than mine.
Yeah. I forget that I might be tiny on your screen.
They're
So
not
yeah,
great.
it
We still got the glasses, but I guess
is 5 red and 3 blue. All together it makes 8. But that's the thing that we need to do next. After our kids can build it by seeing it, then we want to build it by, or we want them to recognize it by seeing it. And then we are just flashing it. Okay, that adds that screen where they have to represent that mental image. So, and sometimes, like, you guys didn't see it, you really didn't. But if I'm in person with my student and they'll say, I don't remember, I try to pull it out of them. What was it? Well, how many red ones did you see? What do you think it was? Because I don't want to just show them again, because I really don't want them to count that. Now, sometimes I know they didn't see it. If they were looking away and they were tying their shoe or they were doing something else, then I will give them a reprieve. But I really try to encourage them to replay that image in your mind, because that is what the power of the bead rack is, to have that mental replay. What did it look like? And so that's the point. Okay. Kind of the next step after they can do quick images within 10 and they know those numbers and can describe them to me. After quick images, I might say, oh, I'm not even going to show you. I have 7 on here. What does it look like? And then they might, I want them to be able to tell me it's 5 reds and it's 2 blues. And that's how you made 7 because I only have 1 row. So they should be able to do that. And yeah, you were right. Nice. And then we can ask how many are on the other side if we're working on combinations of 10. That's another thing you can do. Okay. And then small doubles would be the next step. So when we use doubles, we're going to need 2 rows, but this is a really powerful way to teach doubles because then I want them to build those doubles. So I'm going to have them, I'm going to say slide over 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom. How many do you have? Okay, 2. 1 and 1 is 2. Okay. And then they're going to push them back and then we're going to just go through all those doubles. So 2 and 2 makes 4 and so on. Okay, to build those doubles up to 5 and 5. We're going to work through that until they have their 5 and 5 and they know those. And so we would do that with the same progression that we did with the build the number and the quick images. So we're going to do it by building those numbers with small doubles and then we'll do quick images with small doubles and see if they recognize that. Okay. And then we would work on our doubles plus and minus 1, which is really powerful for that too, because if we know that for instance, 4 and 4 made 8, then I might say, oh, well, let's put 1 more on the top row. Now what do we have? And they'll figure out, oh, well, it's 5 and 4, it's 1 more, so it's 9. Okay. They can also conversely do 1 less. So if I know 4 and 4 is 8, what if we push 1 back? Oh, now it's 4 and 3. Well, what is that? 7. Okay. So it's very helpful for those doubles and doubles plus and minus 1. Okay. Now, kind of where my teaching progression or what I use with students differs a little bit from some of the other progressions that I've seen. Some people move straight from small doubles to large doubles. But one thing that I found helpful for students working with their large doubles is knowing 10 plus a number, and I'll kind of show you why in a second. But so I always taught 10 plus first before large doubles. And to do that, I just had kids move 10 on the top, and then we would just slide over another bead on the bottom. So we have 10 and 1. What does 10 and 1 make? 11. Okay. And then, of course, we go through all the team numbers, 10 and 2, 10 and 3. And I want them to be able to tell me with pretty quick automaticity what those team numbers are. 10 and 4, 14, 10 and 5, 15, without having to do any counting. And once they can recognize that, then we can work on those large doubles. And so we might say, oh, if we know 5 and 5, oh, let's slide 1 more on each row. And so now instead of 5 and 5, it's 6 and 6. Well, how much is 6 and 6? How might kids see that 6 and 6? And if you've got it built in front of you, you can kind of think about that.
10 and 2.
10 and 2. Yes, I was gonna say, yay, Marty. Yep. 10
Yeah,
and 2.
10 and 2. Where's your 10, Marty?
On the red ones.
Yeah, so we can see those red ones. So that's why I teach 10 plus first, because I want them to be able to use the 10 and 2. And if they don't know 10 plus, then that's not something they can draw upon. So they can see, oh, well, there is a group of 10, and then there's 2. And now that makes 12, that 10 and 2. So, and you can do the same thing with those doubles plus 1 and doubles minus 1 with this as well. So next. Okay. I am noticing that 30 minutes goes by really fast. So I'm going to move on right ahead. Another really fun activity that I like to play with my first graders was working on combinations and partitions of 5. We would play a game called Meet Me in the Middle. And I would be the red 5, and they would be the other 5, or whoever was which. And the goal here was to build 5 in the middle. So on my turn, I might slide 3 to the middle, and then I would cover up my others. And then they would have to slide whatever goes with it to meet me in the middle to make 5. So they would need to slide 2 to make 5. And then they would tell me, how did we make 5? 3 and 2 made 5. And then it would be their turn. And of course, when it's their turn, they might slide 4 over. But as the teacher, I'm going to ask them, what did you push? Oh, I pushed 4. And then I usually kind of play it up really well and go, what do I need? Can you help me figure out what do I need to push? And really, I don't give the answer. I elicit the answer from the student and then I push it. Okay? So that it looks like I'm working, but I'm really not. It's really all on them. Okay, so the 4 and 1 is what makes 5. Okay. Another activity that you can do with bead racks is I have, I need. And so for example, if you've got a bead rack, let's make 8. We're going to start with 5. So can you slide over 5 on your bead rack? How many more do you need? Okay, so if we slide over 5, we need 3. And so 5 and 3 made 8. So we can say, oh, this time I have, if we want to make 9, I have 6. I'm going to start with 6. I need 9. So how many more do I need to push?
3.
3, yeah. So you can do that for whatever range of numbers your students need. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? I hope so. Time is really moving swiftly along. So I'm going to just go to my next slide, and I'm not going to play this. Sorry, Tonda. This is a bit, but I will. It's in our links resources, so you can go back and check it out. But it is our KCM's own Tonda and her little granddaughter Lachlan demonstrating how to play arithmetic rack bingo. And I have a link to the resource page, Math Recovery's Hub, where you can download the game board for that as well. And that's a really nice little video, but I want to honor our time as closely as we can, and I'm afraid we won't have time today, but it is really nice. And I think there is the game board and cards as well. Tonda, is that right? I thought I saw Tonda on here. Maybe I didn't.
That's right.
Okay. So that's a nice little demonstration. And I like the demonstrations too, because if you're wanting kids to work with this at home, it's a place where parents can watch the video and see, okay, how do we do this? And Tonda always gives some nice tips on ways to ask questions with your students as well. No, oh no, don't do that, Tonda. Okay, so we can use our bead racks beyond the range of 10 and then 20. Once we have that range within 20, here's just an example of the ways you might use this with double digit addition. I've just taken a screenshot using the app, but if you have your 100 bead rack and you ask students to build numbers, they can build numbers to build that awareness. And then we can ask questions like, how many more do we need to 100? Okay. So we want them to see the structure within the row and then also within the stack. So I want them to know I've got 50 at the top, 50 at the bottom. How close am I? Am I closer to 1 or closer to 100? This is also a good tool for rounding and seeing how far away am I from that next group of 10? And so it can really help kids to visualize the numbers. And another way that we use bead racks is to think multiplicatively, okay? And to think in terms of groups. One thing that I did like about the bead racks that are on the Math Learning Center app is that when you can put all 10 rows where it's red and then white with that little button at the bottom, which makes it easy to get groups of that look the same. And so they don't switch color as you go down. I just took a couple of screenshots that demonstrate how kids might think multiplicatively if we're just counting by 3s and just sliding over groups of 3. And then you can annotate on that slide. And also if we're trying to solve a problem like 9 times 6. And so some students might see it as 5 groups there are groups of 5, that we have 6 groups of 5, and that we have 6 groups of 4, and together, we're going to chunk it together. Another student might see it and think, oh, you know, my 9s are easy if I just think 10 and then take off a group. So this demonstrates how that works, because we're going to take 1 off of each of those, and that's a group of 6 off. And so that's how that might work multiplicatively. So don't just think about your bead rack as something that we're going to use just with our primary students. We can also use that with our intermediate students to think about numbers in multiplicative ways as well. Okay, and you know what? I almost made it by 5. But I've included some of the resources. These links on the last slide take you to the Math Learning Center resources page, which I took a screenshot of their resources that they have. They actually have some nice little manuals that explain how to use the Reckon Rack and give you some supplemental activities. There's 2 activity books that you can download for free from the Math Learning Center, which is very nice that they provide that resource for everybody. And that's where you can find that. And I've also linked to the app that we looked at earlier, and the link to Math Recovery's site that has the video that Tonda made using arithmetic rack bingo. And so there are some things that you can, that might be useful to you as you're trying to use your bead racks, whether you're doing it virtually or hybrid model, or whether you're in person with your students. Your bead racks can be a very powerful tool for helping your kids to get that mental image of what number is. So thank you guys for joining us today. I appreciate everything. And if we can help you in any way, be sure to let us know.
Thanks, everyone.